They say trust is like an eraser. It gets smaller and smaller after every mistake. But in history, sometimes trust doesn't just get smaller, it gets set on fire, thrown off a cliff, and then stomped on for good measure. We've all felt that sting, right? Whether it's a friend forgetting to pay you back or a coworker taking credit for your slide deck. But those are minor leagues. Today, we're looking at the heavy hitters. We're talking about the kind of betrayals that didn't just ruin a weekend. They changed the map, ended dynasties, and turned best friends into literal monsters. From kings who murdered their own children's happiness to heroes left for dead by their own brothers in arms. These are the most epic betrayals in history. Grab a drink, settle in, and let's get into it. Number 1. The Dead Queen's Revenge. Peter I and Inés de Castro. We're starting off in 1340s Portugal with a story that feels like it was written by a horror novelist on a sugar crash. Meet Peter. He's the son of King Alfonso, and like any good royal son, his marriage is basically a business contract. Alfonso wants to play nice with the neighboring kingdom of Castile, so he sets Peter up with a noblewoman named Constanza. Peter is probably bored out of his mind until the royal procession arrives. Out steps a woman named Inés de Castro, who was Constanza's lady-in-waiting. Peter takes one look at her, and as the sources put it, his jaw hits the floor. She's a total 10 out of 10 baddie, and he falls madly in love. The problem, he's already married to Constanza. Peter and Constanza have a miserable marriage, mostly because Peter is not so secretly hooking up with Inés. Rumors fly through the court. Constanza even tries to make Inés the godmother of one of her kids, hoping that would make the affair incestuous by the standards of the time, but the plan fails when the kid dies within a week. Eventually, Constanza dies in 1349 from childbirth complications. Peter thinks, jackpot, now I can finally marry Inés. But his dad, King Alfonso, is having none of it. He's worried that Inés's brothers, powerful Castilian exiles, will drag Portugal into a messy political war. In 1355, Alfonso decides to fix the problem for good. While Peter is away, the king sends 3 men to find Inés at a monastery. In front of her own young children, they cut off her head and leave. When Peter returns and finds the love of his life murdered by his own father's orders, he doesn't just sink into depression, he becomes a human hurricane. He raises an army and starts terrorizing northern Portugal, kicking off a civil war against his own dad. Alfonso dies 2 years later, and Peter becomes king. The betrayal of a father killing his son's joy is one thing, but Peter's response is on another level. He hunts down the assassins for years. When he catches 2 of them, he has their hearts ripped out while they're still alive, screaming at them, "You have done the same to my heart." But here's the most disturbing part. Peter allegedly declared that he and Inés had been married in secret. He had her body exhumed, dressed her rotting corpse in royal silks, and sat her on the throne. Then he forced every nobleman in the country to swear loyalty by kissing her decaying hand. Talk about a "till death do us part" that actually meant it. He had "Ete Domundo," until the end of the world, inscribed on their tombs. Number 2. The Admiral and the Jealous King, Yi Sun Shin. If you want to talk about being done dirty by your own team, you have to talk about Admiral Yi Sun Shin. It's the late 16th century in Korea, and things are, well, they're messy. The Japanese, led by Toyotomi Hideyoshi, decide they want to conquer China, and Korea is just a speed bump in their way. The Korean military at the time was basically a bloated and corrupt political class, led by generals who had never actually seen a real fight. But Yi was different. He was a natural leader, a tactical genius, and most importantly, he actually cared about winning. Naturally, the people in charge hated him for it. He was so good at inspiring his men that he made everyone else look bad. Early in his career, a jealous general falsely accused him of desertion. The king believed it, stripped him of his rank, threw him in prison, and had him tortured. But when the Japanese invaded in 1592 with hundreds of ships, the Korean Navy panicked. 2 top admirals were so scared they sunk their own ships to avoid fighting. E, who had managed to climb back to a small command, didn't panic. He had turtle ships, floating fortresses with cannons and spikes that made boarding impossible. Admiral E was the sparkling piece of glitter embedded in the turd that was the Korean military. He single-handedly sunk hundreds of Japanese ships with zero losses of his own. You'd think the king would be grateful, right? Nope. A rival admiral named Won Gyun, who was insanely jealous of E's success, started talking trash to the king every day. In 1597, when a second invasion started, the government framed E as a traitor again. For the second time in his life, the man who saved the country was stripped of his rank, thrown in prison, and brutally tortured. The king put Won in charge instead. Won was terrible at his job. He drank heavily and disrespected his men. He sailed the fleet into a trap the Japanese had learned from E, and the entire Korean navy was decimated. Won was last seen being chopped to bits while trying to run away. Realizing he had messed up, the king begged E to come back. E was left with just 13 ships and a few hundred demoralized men. In the next battle, outnumbered 25-1, E used superior strategy to sink 31 Japanese ships without losing one of his own. E eventually died in a final battle, telling his son to keep beating his war drum so the men didn't know he was gone. He died a hero, despite being betrayed twice by the very king he saved. Number 3. The Betrayal of Brotherhood, Jean de Carrouges versus Jacques le Gris. Now we're heading to 14th century France for a story about how jealousy can turn best friends into mortal enemies. Jean de Carrouges and Jacques le Gris were squires serving a local count. They fought side by side against the English in the 100 Years' War. Their friendship was so strong that when Jean's first son was born, he asked Jacques to be the child's godfather. But things started to sour when a new count, Pierre de Alencon, took over. Pierre heavily favored Jacques over Jean, and the favoritism made Jean insanely jealous. Life got harder for Jean. His wife and son passed away from illness, leaving him heartbroken. He went off to war to distract himself and returned a hero, marrying a beautiful noble named Marguerite de Thibouville. Years later, Jean and Jacques bump into each other at a party. They get to talking and remember why they were friends in the first place. Jean introduces Jacques to his new wife, Marguerite de Thibouville. Jacques is immediately attracted to her, and now he's the one who's jealous. While Jean is out on campaign, Jacques hears that Marguerite is home alone with no guards. He forces his way into the house and violates her. He threatens to kill her if she tells anyone, but Marguerite tells Jean everything the second he gets home. Jean is furious and files a case, but the judge is Count Pierre, Jacques' new best friend. The case is thrown out. Jean has to go to the King of France himself to demand a trial of combat. On December 29, 1386, the two former friends fought to death in front of the king and a massive crowd. This wasn't just a duel, it was a judgment of God. If Jean lost, Marguerite would be burned to the stake for lying. After a brutal fight involving lances, axes, and swords, Jean managed to pin Jacques to the ground. He ripped off his faceplate and demanded a confession. Jacques screamed his innocence, so Jean plunged a dagger into his throat. The betrayal of a brother ended in a bloody arena, all because one man couldn't handle his friend having something he didn't. Number 4. Left for Dead, the Betrayal of Hugh Glass. Sometimes betrayal isn't a planned-out scheme. It's just a cold, cowardly decision made in a moment of panic. That's the story of Hugh Glass. It's August 1823, and Hugh is a fur trapper in South Dakota. He's scouting ahead of his group when he stumbles onto a mother grizzly bear. The bear mauls him into a mangled wreck that barely resembles a human. We're talking deep gashes, a broken leg, and a sliced throat. His party finds him and drags him along for 2 days, but he's slowing them down in dangerous territory. The leader offers $80 to anyone who will stay with Hugh until he dies, to give him a proper burial. 2 men, John Fitzgerald and a young Jim Bridger, step up, thinking it'll be easy money.
But Hugh refuses to die. 5 days pass. Fitzgerald and Bridger start to panic about Indians in the area. In a moment of cold calculation, they decide to steal Hugh's rifle, knife, and supplies, and they just leave. They catch up to the main group and lie, saying Hugh passed away. Hugh wakes up alone, unarmed and mangled. Enraged by the betrayal, he drags his body 200 miles towards the nearest fort. He's crawling on his belly, eating berries and bugs. At one point, maggots hatch in his wounds and start eating his rotting flesh, which actually saves him by preventing infection. His burning obsession with revenge keeps him alive. After months of tracking, he finally finds Bridger and Fitzgerald. He forgives Bridger, realizing he was just a kid following Fitzgerald's lead, but he wants Fitzgerald dead. He finds him